Jawbreaker. It's a book by Gary Bernson and Ralph Pazzulli. And it's a story that hasn't been told completely till now. And these are two gentlemen that have been so kind as to want to spend a little time with us on the cutting edge today. So we welcome to the cutting edge Ralph Pazzulli, Gary Bernson, and the story of Jawbreaker. Yeah. How did you guys meet? How is it possible that you have a 23-year veteran of the CIA and you've got a guy that was a screenwriter by all prior knowledge, and how did you guys come together?
I was getting toward the end of my career, and I had thought about writing a book, but it was not going to be about this subject. It wasn't going to be Jawbreaker. I thought about writing about something entirely different. And as I thought about it, I went to a bookstore and bought the book, Getting Your Book Published for Dummies, actually. Read the book twice, and then realized I needed to work with someone else if I was going to write a book on my first time out, because I wanted to get it published, I wanted to be successful. And I began searching for someone to work with. And I eventually, after several months of looking online and reading about authors, I would find Ralph Pazzullo's name. I would find that he had written the book At the Fall of Somoza with his father, who had been a U.S. Ambassador and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. I bought the book, read it. I bought another book that he had written called Eve Missing, which was fabulous. Read that as well. And then based on that, I sent him an email and said, I'm an officer of the U.S. government. I would like to, and I would like to meet you at some point to talk about collaborating on a project. I've done a lot of counterterrorism work. I didn't say I was with the agency. And then he agreed to meet me for lunch in New York.
Well, this doesn't fit too much. I mean, you did your investigative reporting in depth and found somebody that was going to fit perfectly for what you wanted them to do. Well, let me ask this. Everyone would like to know that. From the day that you finally touched bases together, did you? How long did it take you to write Jawbreaker? How long did it take?
We basically met for the first time in New York City, as Gary explained, and we sat down. We had a lunch for 5 or 6 hours, and Gary told me the story of another operation that he was involved in. And at the end of that, we agreed to collaborate. We shook hands. I walked him to the train station, and as he was, getting onto the train, he said, "Oh, if this works out, I have another story. I was in Afghanistan, and I led the Jawbreaker team, and I had Bin Laden trapped up in Tora Bora." And I said, "Wait a minute.
Hold that.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about that for a minute." And then it took me a while to convince him to change the order of the books, and the whole process has taken about a year and a half.
First thing that someone's going to ask us, and everybody wanted to know, is that you make reference in the book several times, Gary, to the fact that a gentleman by the name of Gary Schoen, I think it is.
Gary Schroen. Right.
Schroen was there first with Jawbreaker.
Right.
Okay, so that begs the question: when did Jawbreaker initially start? Before you got there, obviously, but when was it put in place in Afghanistan?
Well, you have to understand something. That Jawbreaker was the code name of what the counterterrorism center within CIA used for teams that went into Afghanistan. And I actually had been on a Jawbreaker team a year, actually 15 months before Gary Schroen. I was on the ground in Afghanistan in 2000, with a 5-man team, and we were planning to try to kidnap or capture one of Bin Laden's key lieutenants as a way to figure out what they were planning.
What date was this again?
This was in March of 2000.
March of 2000.
This is March of 2000. So I was on the ground there. We were all alone. There was no U.S. military. There was no combat search and rescue to come and get us. We were out there on the end of a very long
Okay, maybe we
ranch.
should help. There's a bunch of viewers out there, okay, that aren't familiar about Jawbreaker, or actually, I mean, what amazed us greatly after we did our research was the fact that nobody knows actually what really happened in Afghanistan. It was like, oh yeah, that happened. And they don't have any concept, and that's why Jawbreaker is such a good story, and you did such a good job with it. But let's put it into some perspective here. In 1993, we had a terrorist bombing of the World Trade Center the first time.
Yes,
correct.
And I think they just put the last guy finally away to in jail finally recently. That's 13 years later.
Yeah.
In 1996, it was Khobar Towers, we recall,
Yes.
and that was a housing development in Saudi Arabia. Our question was, after we read your book, by the way, which stimulated our brain cells, and we said, were there any agency people in Saudi Arabia there? Was it a targeted hit from the bad guys, or was what happened there?
Are you on about Khobar Towers?
Yes.
Well, Khobar Towers was the Iranian government working with Shias and working with others, what we called Hezbollah of the Hejaz, and in an effort to attack us. I mean, that was an act of war to which the United States never responded. And they killed 17 of our servicemen and injured almost 400 others in that bombing. And had not a couple of very alert security policemen on the roof of that building seen that tractor trailer pull up there and warned everyone of the potential for a bomb and started an evacuation, we would have lost many others.
96, that's 96. Then in 98, we had the Dar es Salaam bombing of one of our embassies, and also the Nairobi embassy. So those were consistently within a few daws of each other, weren't they? Or
Within minutes.
Within minutes. Within minutes
Now, I
of each other.
led the CIA's team to Tanzania for that, and was involved in capturing the very first individuals, and that told us that they were working for Osama bin Laden and it was Al Qaeda. I was dispatched because we believed, like the '96 bombing, which was Hezbollah and Iran, we thought, and like 1992 and 1994 in Argentina, which were bombings by Hezbollah with the support of Iran, that this was again another Hezbollah sort of Iranian bombing. And then of course we'd get out there and we'd capture them, and it would turn out they were Sunnis and that bin Laden had gone big.
Okay, now because this, we have to get these proper in perspective. That's 98. Then we believe that the administration at the time, the Clinton administration, used infinite, what was the name of that operation?
Infinite Reach.
Yeah.
Infinite Reach,
Yes, yeah.
to drop some cruise missiles on the Osama bin Laden camps out in the desert.
Right.
And then they hit some aspirin factory or baby bottle factory that was where?
Sudan.
In the Sudan.
In the Sudan.
Khartoum.
Yeah.
Right. Now, our question to you was, of course, we couldn't ask the people at the time or even now, but we can certainly ask you, what kind of intelligence was that? I mean,
Well, they would have only attacked those facilities with knowledge that they had been used before, that they had grid coordinates, that, it wasn't, as some people said, a pig and a poke. They took a decent shot at facilities they'd known had been used. Unfortunately, our enemies at that time, bin Laden and a lot of the terrorists on the ground in Afghanistan, didn't respect the fact that we would fire missiles at them. They only respected the fact when you come at them and when you fight them face to face.
Okay, now we're jumping over here because you got so much stuff that you know about this, and just great. Then the coal situation happened, and we lost a Navy ship and a lot of good sailors on there in Yemen, and so it's starting to become a little bothersome, this Osama bin Laden person and his group of terrorists.
Absolutely.
And so at that point in time, we had that bombing go on.
Correct.
And what was our responses as a country then? And that
Well, there was no immediate response by the Clinton administration. They wanted to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, almost like in a court of law, that it was Al Qaeda. It was pretty clear to most of us in the intel community. And there was no response. And then, of course, the Clinton administration leaves, the Bush administration comes in, and they don't react to it either.
Hey, Rob, I
Okay.
want to jump in. I've got a question for you. It's something you said earlier, Gary. Thank you for saying this today. In July of 2000, a certain congressman told the U.S. Congressional Committee that he gave bin Laden's exact location in Bahrain, yet it fell on deaf ears. He called it the biggest intelligence failure in the history of his country. You indicated you were over there right around that same time. He indicated, from what we've read, that the CIA dragged their feet by a couple weeks. What I think I heard you say earlier, that's not necessarily the case.
Oh, no, it's not the case. The CIA was entering, there were multiple teams. I think the Jawbreaker team that I went on in 2000 was Jawbreaker 5. There had been 4 other teams in there working with the Northern Alliance to collect intelligence. But you have to remember something. We did a lot of work strategically, CIA did, to identify bin Laden, to say where he was, and there were multiple opportunities to either kill him or capture him. But the Clinton administration would not do it. They would not pull the trigger. So there's a lot of people in America, of course, that say it's CIA's fault. The point is this is, CIA did not have the tactical information on 11 September. to stop that attack. But strategically, it identified bin Laden as a threat and had given the administration multiple opportunities to capture or kill him, which were not taken by the administration.
Okay, listen, we've got so much to cover. I got to jump in here on this because we got to identify the players.
Right.
Okay, we got some players here. Kofor Black. Okay, Kofor Black you mentioned in your book without a pseudonym. In other words, he was someone you could identify and say, this is the guy I report to.
Correct.
Michael Scheuer.
Scheuer,
Yeah. Scheuer, who we see on TV all the time on Fox News or on CNN or whatever, responding to the fact that we didn't care whether Osama bin Laden was around at the time, and he's kind of, I don't know, I call him squishy, to be honest. I don't know him. He's a good man?
Very bright fellow.
All right.
Make no mistake.
Very intellectual.
Well, you have to understand something, first off. Kofor Black, outstanding man, field operative, had come up through the ranks in CIA, and is really the man that provides the really powerful leadership in CIA, in the Counterterrorism Center, and especially after 11 September. We should all be grateful to what he did. I am grateful to him. Mike Scheuer served as both an analyst and in the operations segment of CIA. He is the man that understood before almost anyone else that bin Laden was a threat. He convinced CIA to establish the resources for us to collect against bin Laden. Had it not been for Scheuer, we would not have known everything about bin Laden that we did when we conducted the war, or Al-Qaeda, and we wouldn't have had the success. Scheuer understood early on the terrible danger about bin Laden, and he was like a man on the deck of the Titanic screaming, iceberg, 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 and the response was, take that man down below, he's bothering the passengers.
Is this a Richard Clarke moment as well? Did Richard Clarke stand up the way that Mike Scheuer did?
Well, I think that Clarke was a very competent man at the National Security Council, and my dealings were always, anytime I dealt with Clarke, it was in a what we called a video conference, where Kofor Black would be there, I would be there, other people would be there, and Clarke would be managing the responses where it was CIA, FBI, they would all meet in these teleconferences when there were problems. And I liked Clarke. I thought Clarke was very, very bright. I thought he was dynamic, and he was very forward-leaning.
Did he report to the President or the National Security Advisor?
National Security Advisor.
All right. The issues that we get confused about, and this is where your book comes out. And I mean, it just knocked us right off our heels after we started the beginning of the book, read it to the end. No one in this country, you finally did it. You finally exposed something to the people of this country, and we were, as I said, again, shocked. About 110 CIA operatives, 350 Special Forces, Delta Force people, and a few mop-up guys from the 101st Airborne, 500 or something less, I don't know how many it was, but at any rate, they took a country of 30 million people. Your group was able, with that many people, to take a country of 30 million people and change the regime through technology. We learned about,
Well, technology was part of it. The bigger part of it was leadership.
Understood, and the thing that struck us so hard was the fact that from the beginning, when you met with Tommy Franks, General Tommy Franks, they had a plan to do this, and they had the support of these Northern Alliance people.
Yes.
That's the question everybody wants to know. How did we get the support of the Northern Alliance people to make this regime change?
Well, we had been in contact with them for some years. We'd been doing liaison with them, and the previous Jawbreaker teams that had flown in there, we were working with Massoud, and so they wanted.
Massoud is the guy that got.
Ahmed Shah Massoud was
he was the guy. He was the great leader that was
of the
assassinated.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. And we knew them. We'd had contact with them. They wanted a closer relationship with us, but.